8 years ago, my biological mother watched me walk down her gravel driveway into the freezing rain with nothing but a single backpack, $280 in cash, and a targeted reputation that she had completely incinerated in front of our entire community. She truly believed that by branding me a mentally unstable criminal who had stolen a local university teaching scholarship, she had successfully neutralized the only threat to her golden child's fragile public image. She had absolutely no idea that her calculated cruelty was merely a countdown clock, or that nearly a decade later, 27 frantic identical voicemail recordings would arrive on my encrypted business server in a single night to announce her absolute financial execution. My name is Elena Sterling. Today, I operate as the managing senior partner of a high-tier architectural asset firm in the capital city, overseeing the development of multi-million-dollar structural portfolios. But 8 years ago, on the morning of June 12, 2018, I was a 20-year-old pariah inside my own household. My mother, Beatrice Sterling, and my younger sister, Bianca, lived on an absolute currency of superficial status and public perception. Beatrice was a prominent leader within our local parish board, a woman who weaponized religion and maternal virtue to maintain an illusion of flawless family perfection. Bianca was her absolute creation, a deeply insecure, highly pampered girl who failed every single college entrance examination but was continuously pushed forward as the intellectual star of the family, while I was left in the background to handle the administrative burdens of Beatrice's localized community projects. The catalyst for my forced exile was a highly competitive, fully funded international teaching and research scholarship at the Metropolitan Institute, valued at over $140,000. I had spent 4 years working 80 hours a week, maintaining a flawless academic record, and drafting a comprehensive structural design syllabus to win that single spot. The morning the official physical certificate arrived in our mailbox, Beatrice didn't congratulate me. Instead, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated coldness. She realized that my independent success would completely eclipse Bianca, who had just been rejected from a low-tier community college program the very same week. Within 24 hours, Beatrice executed a masterclass in psychological destruction. She took the physical scholarship documents from my desk, shredded them in the kitchen, and contacted the Metropolitan Institute's administrative board under a corporate alias, claiming that I had accessed their database unauthorized to alter my final evaluation metrics. To ensure I could never defend myself locally, she stood in front of our entire church congregation the following Sunday morning, weeping openly as she told the pastor and the board that I was suffering from severe, dangerous mental instability and had constructed a fraudulent reality about an international award. When I confronted her in the living room that evening, Beatrice threw a worn canvas backpack and a tiny stack of crumpled bills at my feet. She looked at me with an expression of absolute satisfaction and told me that she was officially purging the family name of my toxic, unstable presence. She stated flatly that I was a pathological liar who had tried to steal an academic achievement to humiliate my sister, declaring that if I didn't leave her property immediately, she would have the county sheriff transport me directly to a psychiatric detention facility. Bianca stood by the staircase, wearing an expensive designer coat my parents had bought her, smiling quietly as she watched me pack my single spare sweater. I didn't scream, I didn't plead, and I didn't cry. I picked up the backpack, pocketed the $280, and walked out into the dark, completely cutting ties with every single person who carried the Sterling name. For 8 long years, I lived as a complete ghost to them. I utilized my digital copies of the original records to completely clear my name with the university board, secured an independent corporate fellowship, and worked my way into the upper echelons of the architectural asset industry. I legally changed my corporate registration details, buried my past, and focused entirely on acquiring prime commercial real estate packages. My family assumed I was either living in a state institution or struggling on the fringes of society, completely oblivious to the fact that I was quietly building a financial fortress that would eventually dwarf their entire existence. The global economic climate shifted dramatically by the spring of 2026. Beatrice and Bianca had spent the last 8 years living far beyond their actual financial means. To fund Bianca's failed lifestyle brands, luxury European vacations, and a massive custom-built suburban mansion, Beatrice had quietly placed their primary family heritage estate, a massive piece of commercial agricultural land that had been in the Sterling line for generations, as collateral under a high-risk private equity loan structure. They believed they could continuously roll over the debt using Beatrice's local church connections and temporary investments, completely unaware of the underlying reality of the corporate markets. Last month, Bianca was scrolling through an international business registry, attempting to find a high-tier corporate sponsor for her latest bankrupt design venture, when she stumbled upon my legal name listed as the sole primary shareholder of Sterling Vanguard Holdings. The realization that the sister they had discarded as a mentally unstable vagrant was now the absolute owner of a multi-million-dollar asset management firm sent an instantaneous shockwave through their entire household. The strategy changed from absolute hostility to desperate, sickening manipulation within a matter of minutes. My private unlisted business phone line lit up on a quiet Thursday evening. First, my golden child sister called me, her voice dripping with a forced, unnatural sweetness that made my skin crawl. She called me sweetheart over the line, pretending as if the last 8 years were just a tragic family misunderstanding, asking if we could meet for an expensive dinner to catch up on my wonderful career. I didn't speak. I simply listened to her frantic breathing before ending the call and routing her number to my digital recording service. Then, within the hour, my father called, his tone shifting from awkward silence to a strained, authoritative parental warmth. Then my grandmother called, her fragile, shaking voice weaponizing guilt, claiming she wanted to see her favorite granddaughter one last time before her health completely failed. Within a single 24-hour window, my secure digital inbox was completely flooded. I had 27 consecutive messages waiting on my terminal, and as I scrolled through the automated audio transcripts in the dead of night, every single recording said the exact same 3 words: "We need help." The absolute panic in their voices wasn't driven by a sudden wave of familial love or maternal remorse. It was driven by the cold, unyielding mechanics of a massive financial execution. What Beatrice and Bianca completely failed to investigate when they signed their high-risk private equity loan papers was the exact identity of the primary institution that had quietly bought out their outstanding $650,000 debt portfolio 3 months prior. Through a strategic, anonymous corporate acquisition, Sterling Vanguard Holdings had successfully purchased 100% of the active debt liens associated with the Sterling family estate. For 8 years, I had monitored their public filings, watching them pile debt upon debt to maintain their high society illusions. The moment they defaulted on their quarterly interest adjustment cycle, which occurred precisely 48 hours before they found my name online, I had executed a non-negotiable acceleration clause embedded deep within the secondary commercial contract. I sat at my executive desk, looking at the 27 unread notification flags on my monitor, my face completely expressionless. I clicked the audio playback for the final message, which came directly from Beatrice. The arrogant, community-leading matriarch was completely gone. Her voice was a ragged, high-pitched shriek of absolute desperation, weeping openly as she begged me to answer, stating that an automated corporate foreclosure notice had just been pinned to her front door by a state legal courier. I didn't reply to a single message. Instead, at 8 a.m. the following morning, I authorized my firm's corporate legal team and the county civil enforcement unit to finalize the asset seizure. Because Beatrice had illegally used the church's local community development fund as a secondary shield to back her personal high-risk loans, my comprehensive forensic audit didn't just target the family house. It triggered a massive automated investigation by the State Treasury Compliance Office into her entire financial history. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, the public execution of Beatrice's pristine reputation was completely synchronized. While she was desperately trying to schedule an emergency meeting with her church board to secure a bailout loan, 3 state financial investigators arrived at the parish headquarters. They didn't just freeze her personal lines, they presented a certified court order detailing 8 years of systematic asset siphoning, unauthorized fund rerouting, and corporate tax evasion that she had committed to fund Bianca's lavish lifestyle. The very community she had stood in front of to brand me as a mentally unstable criminal watched in absolute horror as Beatrice was escorted down the building steps in administrative custody, her hands shielded by a legal jacket as local news crews captured the entire downfall. Bianca's custom-built suburban mansion was placed under an immediate federal asset lock, with civil recovery agents arriving to impound her luxury vehicles and freeze every single liquid checking account registered to her brand name. The ripple effect of this systematic dismantle spread rapidly through the remaining branches of the extended family network. For nearly a decade, my uncles, aunts, and cousins had looked at me through the distorted lens Beatrice had crafted. I was the dark family secret, the cautionary tale whispered at holiday gatherings about the girl who broke her mother's heart and threw away her sanity for a non-existent academic fantasy. Now, as the federal investigation documents became part of the public registry, those same relatives found themselves forced to confront a reality that shattered their constructed worldview. I began receiving secondary waves of communication on my public corporate interface, not from my immediate family, but from the extended bloodline that had spent years ignoring my existence. My Uncle Harrison, a man who had flatly refused to return my single phone call when I needed a signature for an apartment lease in 2019, sent a lengthily drafted letter to my executive assistant. He claimed that the family had been completely misled by Beatrice's convincing performances, urging me to show executive clemency and establish a private corporate trust fund to keep our ancestors' agricultural land from being entirely absorbed by municipal development firms. I reviewed his digital correspondence during my afternoon compliance check, experiencing nothing but a profound sense of detached validation. I instructed my digital systems to place his domain on a permanent corporate filter. These individuals were not experiencing a sudden moral revelation about the injustice of my exile. They were simply experiencing the immediate terror of watching a high-status family branch collapse into absolute poverty. Their loyalty was never tethered to truth or blood. It was tethered entirely to the preservation of their collective social capital. By the second week of the structural foreclosure, the local parish board issued a formal, public apology broadcast via their digital newsletters, completely retracting the statement Beatrice had entered into the historical parish ledger 8 years prior. The new administration acknowledged that my academic credentials and international teaching scholarship were completely verified, admitting that the organization had been weaponized as an instrument of targeted defamation. This public document was the final piece of material closure I required. I did not care about their spiritual sentiment, but having the administrative record cleared in black and white permanently restored the professional profile they had attempted to bury. Meanwhile, the physical reality of Beatrice and Bianca's downfall reached its absolute baseline. Deprived of their siphoned bank accounts, credit privileges, and the multi-million-dollar suburban infrastructure, They were forced to vacate the main agricultural estate within 72 hours under the supervision of state legal marshals. The expensive furniture, imported decor, and designer clothing lines Bianca had accumulated over the years were systematically logged into the asset seizure ledger to offset the outstanding interest penalties accrued by Sterling Vanguard Holdings. My brother, who had remained a silent, passive bystander during the dark, rainy night when I was thrown out into the street, managed to track down my secure corporate headquarters later that month. He stood in the expansive, marble-clad reception lobby, looking completely out of place among the senior project managers and structural engineers who populated my firm. When my administrative assistant finally allowed him to step into my private corner office, his hands were trembling as he gripped his worn leather brief pack. He looked at me with an expression that mixed deep-seated resentment with an unmitigated, paralyzing terror. He realized that the quiet, isolated girl they had discarded with $280 had grown into an absolute economic titan capable of erasing their entire legacy from the societal grid. "Elena, please," he whispered, his voice cracking under the structural silence of the room as he leaned heavily against the mahogany guest chairs. "Mom is currently facing 5 years of federal compliance audits, and her health is completely failing under the stress. Bianca has been completely evicted from her properties. They are living in a low-tier, single-room extended-stay motel right next to the interstate highway. They have absolutely nothing left, Elena. They are counting loose change just to afford basic weekly groceries. How can you carry this level of freezing mechanical coldness toward your own flesh and blood?" 8 years ago, Beatrice stood in front of the entire world and declared that my existence was a completely fabricated, mentally unstable illusion. I stated flatly, my voice completely devoid of emotional static as I looked up from my architectural blueprints with an unyielding, razor-sharp focus. I simply decided to take her public words and turn them into a definitive material reality. As far as the financial, social, and legal grid of this country is concerned, the Beatrice Sterling branch no longer possesses an active identity. I did not destroy your world, Julian. I merely stepped out of the way and allowed the absolute weight of your own structural and moral fraud to collapse completely on your heads. I raised my hand slightly to signal my corporate security team, and without another single word exchanged, he was quietly, permanently escorted out of the perimeter of the corporate high-rise. I stood up from my executive desk and walked over to the expansive floor-to-ceiling glass window of my office, looking out at the sprawling concrete city skyline unfolding beneath me. My biological family had spent an entire lifetime operating under the primitive belief that loud public perception, superficial religious standing, and emotional manipulation could permanently overwrite the hard facts of human labor, discipline, and material asset ownership. They thought that by leaving a 20-year-old girl with absolutely nothing but a canvas backpack on a dark, desolate road, they had permanently secured their golden child's future at my expense. Now, as I watched the automated market ticker finalize the complete, non-negotiable liquidation of their family heritage name, I knew that the structural integrity of my life was entirely absolute, and no amount of frantic late-night messages could ever alter the unyielding foundation I had built entirely with my own hands.